Guys, this Breonna Taylor situation is extremely difficult to talk about. I was going to record this video last night, but I literally had to sleep on my thoughts because it's just incredibly nuanced situation that I feel like an opinion on this shouldn't be rushed and it should be well thought out, because I really believe there's a very important point with this whole Breonna Taylor situation that is completely being missed by most of mainstream media, and mainly the liberal media, the race baiting media. But before we get into that, my name is Greg Foreman and you're watching A Black Conservative Perspective. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my videos. You can follow me on Twitter at GForemanBCP, and most importantly, share A Black Conservative Perspective, aka a liberal's worst nightmare. Let's get it. So it was announced that the family of Breonna Taylor, who was tragically killed in a crossfire between police and her then boyfriend, she was caught in a crossfire and she was killed. She's going to receive a $12 million settlement from the city of Louisville. And there's a lot of interesting takes on this settlement. But before I talk about the settlement, I think I want to focus on Breonna Taylor and what led up to this situation, because I think there's a very important point that's being missed that a lot of young women and young girls need to understand about life. So I'm going to deliver that message that I think that a lot of people are missing. First off, I'm saying Breonna Taylor's death was tragic, and nobody deserves to die in a situation like that, right? I think most reasonable people can agree with that. However, Breonna Taylor was a victim of bad decision making and bad luck. That's what happened to her. And not enough people are focusing on the incidents and what led up to Breonna Taylor being a person of interest for police and having her name and address on the search warrant in the first place. Now, there's been some information that's come out about her and her affiliations with her ex-boyfriend, who was allegedly dealing drugs, and everything I'm saying is alleged, right? And I'm not going to get too deep into the details because I just want to focus on the overall point. But, there's some strong evidence that suggests that, Breonna Taylor, was at the very least associated, if not facilitating, certain criminal and drug activities in a past relationship, right? And some of that could have still been going on, which is the reason why she was on the search warrant in the first place. And that's the reason why all this happened in the first place. What people are not really focused on, which I think they need to focus on, especially when it comes to young women, is that Breonna Taylor consciously chose to be involved with somebody and associated with people who were involved in dealing drugs and criminal activity to the point where they got major interest from the police, right? And the counter argument that people always say when you bring that up is that, well, that doesn't mean she deserved to die. I mean, nobody's saying she deserved to die. That's why I said from the beginning of this video that Breonna Taylor not deserve to die. Nobody deserves to die like that. However, we live in the real world. We don't live in the imaginary world that some of these people live in, where they think there's no consequences to your actions. I feel like a lot of young women get caught up in having boyfriends and associates that deal drugs, that are involved in criminal activities, and they get caught up in crossfire and end up losing their lives all the time. But you never hear about that because it didn't happen from the police. Choosing who you want to associate with, right? And that's a hard decision, right? Those are important things in life that happen that we're not focused on, because instead we're focused on racism, even though racism has nothing to do with what happened with Breonna Taylor. It really doesn't, right? Why is Breonna Taylor's name and address on a search warrant in the first place? A no-knock warrant at that. A warrant that had to go through multiple levels of scrutiny and be signed off on before it can be executed, right? Like that doesn't just happen out of coincidence. If you're not associating with yourself with, certain types of people, then it wouldn't happen in the first place. And I'm saying this because I have the mentality of control what you can control in life. I got that from playing football, right? There's chaos around us everywhere, right? You can help mitigate the possibility of something tragic happening to you, or you being caught up in certain things, if you just make better decisions about who you choose to associate with life and what you choose to do with this life. If I'm driving and I choose to text while I drive and I swerve in the other lane and I hit a car head on and I die in an accident, no, I did not deserve to die. But that small mistake led to my death. That's the reality of the world that we live in. Small mistakes lead to death and destruction. Sometimes that's how it is. And that's what happened with Breonna Taylor. I'm not sure if Breonna Taylor was trying to, get out of that lifestyle or trying to get away from her ex or, moving on or doing whatever. I'm not sure exactly what was going on at that point. But what I do know, up until that point, she did things that led to her being a person of interest from the police. And again, this happens all the time, right? In which young women get caught up in violence that they're not necessarily facilitating, but they may be associated with, and they end up losing their lives and nobody cares because it wasn't a police officer that did it or a white person. And it's a shame. And again, that's why I want to focus on personal responsibility. Be careful who you associate with. Don't associate with people doing legal activities. Decrease your chances of having run-ins with the police. That's a part of solving the police issue. A part of solving the police issue is taking personal responsibility and avoiding them at all costs. Therefore, you significantly decrease your chances of being killed by one. It's very simple. But like I said before, and I'll say it again, the death is tragic, right? Now, let's talk about the actual settlement. Her family got $12 million. I personally don't really have a problem with it, except the fact that the city's not really taking any real responsibility for it. Like, why are you giving out a $12 million settlement if you're not going to admit to much wrongdoing, right? I mean, I think they've said some things, they may have messed up on, but you need to take major responsibility if you're going to dwell out that type of money. Because dwelling out that type of money without taking major responsibility for it tells me just one thing and one thing only. It tells me that you're paying off this family so that you can take pressure off of the city to arrest those police officers, right? And the city knows that it's going to cost them way more money to try to prosecute these police officers and then have them be found not guilty because it is legally ambiguous in terms of who was acting in self-defense and who was the aggressor in the situation. And again, I'm not a lawyer. Don't take my word for it. I'm just giving you my synopsis of it based off what I've read. Again, I'm not a lawyer, right? And that's my hunch for why they have not arrested any of these police yet. It's because, again, it is unclear who is the aggressor and who is acting in self-defense, and it also becomes a lot more murkier considering that the cops were acting in their official capacity. That's the conclusion I've come to based off of things that I've read. So to me, it sounds like it would be very expensive to try to prosecute these cops in any significant way. So what happens is that if you arrest the cops like all these people want, and then they end up being found not guilty or whatever, then you have protests and riots in the streets again. And if you have protests and riots in the streets again, that's going to cost the city way more than $12 million to deal with, right? And also keep in mind, a part of this package was the promise of doing some police reform where they're going to focus on a community policing model. So essentially, I don't really have a problem with a $12 million settlement. And the reason why is because, again, I think the city is long-term saving money compared to the amount of money they would have to pay out had they succumb to pressure of these protesters and all these athletes and celebrities and actually try to prosecute these cops, which remains to be seen whether they actually will. I think the attorney general is going to hand down a decision on that pretty soon. So we'll see. But if I'm a taxpayer, yes, I would be a little ticked off by something like this because the liberals try to paint the picture that the government is somehow incentivized to go out here and kill black people. And this actually tells the opposite story. The government is not incentivized to go out here and kill black people or to have these police brutality cases because they do cost a hell of a lot of money. The government's not incentivized for this type of stuff to happen. The taxpayer's not incentivized for this type of stuff to happen. I feel that this case, had it not got such national attention, I feel like that this type of payout would not have happened. I really don't. But really, that's a drop in the bucket compared to the potential damage that would be caused had the city did nothing or continue to fight the civil settlement and Breonna Taylor got nothing and there was pressure on them to arrest the cops and did nothing, I think that eventually more violence and protests would have broke out. So ultimately, they probably ended up saving money in the long run. But at the same time, it does feel like, we're painting the wrong picture, and we're sending the wrong picture to young people, and we're not focused enough on the decision making that young people, especially young women and young girls, make in terms of who they choose to associate, who they choose to be in relationships with, because that leads to a lot more death and destruction than what happened with a search warrant going wrong with Breonna Taylor. And it's really sad that in this society, we never really focus on the real issues and taking personal responsibility for when we put ourselves in situations that lead to death and destruction. So we'll see what happens. Again, this situation is tragic. It's really hard for me to talk about. I try to be as nuanced as possible. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.